Joining us now, somebody else we can't wait for on the Deseret First Credit Union Hotline, SB Nation specialist, and a guy that we feel like is a strong candidate to become college football's commissioner.
The commish!
Bill Connelly. Bill, nice to have you back on the show.
Yeah, thank you. If you're the only person who has declared their candidacy, then you are the leader. And so, yes, I completely concur with what you said.
We're on the campaign trail with Bill Connelly. Bill, we enjoy what you've written over the past few weeks, especially about BYU and Utah. That has caught our attention. And we couldn't help but notice that when you wrote Utah's preview, you mentioned that the showdown at BYU was the Utes' biggest game. Why do you feel like that is the biggest game for the Utes and the Cougars?
Yeah, Utah fans kind of noticed that too. I'm not going to say that we would ever, needle a fan base by knowing exactly what will get them riled up, but it didn't hurt in this case. But no, I mean, this year, and Vegas has me backed up on this year Utah's schedule gets pretty ridiculously hard. And basically, my logic there, I mean, number one, it is a rivalry game, so even whether they acknowledge it or not, therefore it gets a point for that. But the bottom line is, if you want to make sure you're finished 6-6, that becomes pretty hard to do if you lose to BYU. And BYU came really close last year to beating Utah. So, if they lose that game, it could mean a 2-4 start, depending on how things break, and that makes it a pretty big game in my eyes.
We talked about it a couple weeks ago when you were on, but this game this year seems to have even more increased meaning and context, given BYU's lost 6 in a row, given Utah's over-unders at 5.5 for a win total. What do you think of the context going into this year's Week 2 matchup with Utah and BYU?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it is in Provo to begin with, and like I said, BYU almost won in Utah last year. But you've got after that, you've got a likely win against San Jose State, so that's fine. Even if you lose, you're 2-1. If you lose to BYU, but then the trip to Arizona. Arizona is actually healthy, or could be healthy, I guess, this year. I shouldn't jinx them. And if they are healthy, they are much more experienced than they were last year. Stanford at home is obviously a potential loss. Trip to USC is a likely loss. So I mean, you really are. If you lose that game, you're looking at 2-4 when Arizona State comes to town. So that there are more wins or potential wins on the back end of the schedule. But this is a tricky slate, especially early, and they really weren't on paper any better than BYU last year. And now they have to win in Provo.
So in a roundabout way, you are saying that if Utah doesn't beat BYU, they might not make a bowl game. Is that what I'm hearing?
It makes it a lot harder, that's for sure. I mean, right now, I think the projected win total that I have is right at about 5.8, and those are conservative. That's if it's a 60% chance of winning, you get 0.6. So nobody's very high or low. But regardless, there are a ton of toss-ups on that schedule, and if you lose the very first one, things get a little trickier.
Well, like you said, Las Vegas is backing your numbers. They have Utah's over/under win total set at 5.5. That according to South Point. BYU, meanwhile, by the same group of experts, has their win total set at 10 right now, which was like, whoa, and you have it closer to 8. Why do you feel like your projection should be more accurate than Las Vegas?
Well, I'm never going to say I'm more accurate than Vegas. Vegas knows what it's doing. But I would say the major difference here is that I try to keep my projections pretty simple, and because if you don't keep them simple if you don't keep them at a pretty high level, you'll just drown in the granularity. And I think what Vegas is seeing that my numbers aren't necessarily seeing is that Tanner Mangum is kind of like having a returning starter at quarterback. My numbers just look at last year's stats, and they see that last year's starting quarterback, the guy who threw for most of last year's yards, is gone. And so I would assume that alone, if you look at the projections, BYU's projected 23rd with my numbers, but 83rd on offense. I would not assume that they finish 83rd, and part of the reason for that low projection is the quarterback.
You recently released an article talking about relegation and promotion. If it happened in college football, what would that mean? Where did you have BYU in that, and what caused you to think of that? Because I think that's a pretty fun idea.
Yeah, we've been tinkering with the relegation idea for a few years, and nobody ever says no when I offer to make some ridiculous simulation. But yeah, I mean the bottom line with the commissioner, the big commissioner platform thing that we put out a couple of weeks ago, and then this piece is that the biggest thing for me with college football is that we need to have as much merit involved as possible, and that's something that we lose a lot in college football when you think about how much of your conference status, whether you're in a power conference or not, depends on geography and who you were friends with in 1933. And so
Notre Dame agrees.
And BYU is in trouble in both of those accounts. So, that is, they have played like a power conference team program for going on 3 decades, but they aren't in a power conference, and that's part of the reason why. So, it really is, you think about a lot of the teams that struggle most of the time at the power conference level, they haven't really done anything in the last 40 years to really earn a spot in the power conferences, while BYU and Boise State and all these other teams, Toledo, North Dakota State at this point, have in fact have made the right moves and played at a top 40 level for a long time and probably deserve power status. So that's where it all came from. And so to see what the effects of if we took divisions 1, 2, and 3, broke them into 8 tiers basically, and then just started promoting and relegating the champs and the last place teams each year, you end up in a situation where the Pac-12 is made up of Boise State and BYU instead of, I believe, Oregon State, and I think Washington State still hasn't quite made it back up yet at the moment.
Bill Connelly, SB Nation college football expert, with us on BYU Sports Nation. The idea of knocking bad Power 5 teams down to the Group of 5 conferences and then replacing them with deserving Group of 5 teams, and that would bring a whole new dynamic to college football. Yet frankly, it's just impossible. Why is it impossible, Bill?
It's impossible because this is as great an idea as this is. It's something you have to bake into to the mix at the very start, because once you have an established top tier of conference members, neither they nor their friends in the power conferences are going to say, yes, let's do this, and maybe Rutgers will be playing in the Missouri Valley Conference in 2 years. Nobody's going to do that, and those connections are strong enough to where this is something that would have to have been baked in from the very start, and it wasn't, so that we're stuck with what we have.
Bill, you have the BYU audience at this point. Please give us your best or take the floor for your platform to become the commissioner of college football.
Yeah, well, this piece that we put out on SB Nation, it came about in a couple different ways. Number one, college football needs a commissioner. There are bigger decisions that need to be made above just like the conference per conference level, or even the power conference, or Division 1 versus 2 and 3, et cetera. There are bigger decisions about college football that need to be made over the coming 5, 10, 20 years, and a commissioner that structure would be perfect. The problem is, like Bud Selig being an owner and then becoming the commissioner of a bunch of owners in Major League Baseball, if it is an insider, then nothing really changes. You're just changing the structure slightly, and the decision-making basically goes about the same way. So the thought here was that it would need to be somebody who's not already kind of influenced by and beholden to the conference commissioners, for instance. And then, since we started this piece last year when there was a campaign going on, we twisted that around to, it should just be me. And so that was how that piece came about, and I really enjoyed it.
Bill Connelly, a man that America can trust.
That's
I can
right.
see the platform
That's right.
now. What's up next for your summer series of engaging articles while we wait for the college football season to start?
Well, the giant relegation simulation is in the rearview mirror now, so now it's basically focusing mostly on the power conference previews. Just about done with the Pac-12. Take a week off next week to go on location to a secret destination that I will probably accidentally reveal on Twitter or Instagram, and then we'll resume with, I think, the Big Ten after that. So now we're in the home stretch. We're in the power conference previews. We've made it to the worst part of the valley at this point.
Bill Connelly with us. Let's just finish with this one. Will the Cavaliers beat the Warriors at least one game in the NBA Finals?
As a writer for SB Nation, and a site that has made a lot of bones off of the 3-1, they were down 3-1 joke from last year. I do hope they get to win at least one here, so that we can say they were down 3-1, and everybody can make jokes for a day until the Warriors go back home and smoke them. So I do. Charlotte Wilder, I believe, one of our SB Nation writers, wrote a piece yesterday about, at this point the only entertainment value is if they go 16-0. So I'm kind of rooting for that too. I guess that means I'm happy either way.
Great stuff. Bill, always a pleasure to talk to you. You can find more of Bill's stuff on SB Nation or the podcast Ain't Played Anyone, I should say. Great stuff. Google his name. I can't guarantee you won't get lost in that vortex, though.
Yeah, and you'll also find things about a Scottish comedian in there, too.
That's right, baby.
Bill, great to talk to you. We'll do it again soon.
Thank you.
All right. Bill Connelly of SB Nation.